On the 9th of September 1976, the man who led China for almost 3 decades, Mao, died in Beijing at the age of 82. His death was not just the passing of a political leader or dictator. For millions of people in China, it was the end of an era and the conclusion of a revolutionary age, and time that for some had brought hope, but to others had brought a significant amount of suffering. Mao was a communist leader, and he founded the People's Republic of China and was responsible for the policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. But in these, a huge amount of purges took place, and over 1.5 million people died as victims of this being executed. Those who protested against his rule and leadership faced arrest and death themselves, and any unrest was dealt with swiftly by the army. But following his death, the body of the dictator was placed inside of a crystal coffin, and today is still on display inside of his mausoleum. But how on earth was his body preserved, and what on earth happened to it today to ensure the remains of one of the most ruthless men in Chinese history remains pristine and free from decay and rot? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. By the mid-1970s, Mao was a frail and very sick man. Decades of heavy smoking and unhealthy lifestyle had taken a serious toll on his body. He suffered from Parkinson's disease, which left him with shaking hands and slurred speech, and he also had heart and lung problems, which made it difficult for him to breathe. In his final years, Mao often appeared in public looking weak, propped up by aides and rarely speaking more than a few words. His mind, too, was failing him. Although he still held the title of Chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, much of the real decision-making was being handled by his close circle of advisers, including his wife, Jiang Qing, who was part of the radical Gang of Four. Despite his failing health, Mao continued to live inside of the heavily guarded Zhengani leadership compound in Beijing. Doctors, nurses and political aides watched over him day and night. But by 1976 it was clear his time was running out. In the year 1976, it was already a troubled one for China. In January, Mao's close ally and Premier Zhou Enlai had died. Zhou was widely respected by the Chinese public, and his death caused a huge outpouring of grief, and later that year, in April, protests in Tiananmen Square against the radical policies of Mao's allies were brutally suppressed. Then, in July, a massive earthquake struck the city of Tangshan, killing hundreds of thousands of people. Many saw these disasters as ominous signs that the country was facing a turning point. As Mao's health deteriorated in the summer of 1976, senior leaders in Beijing prepared for the inevitable. But Mao's illness was kept closely guarded. Only a small inner circle knew the true extent of his decline, and by early September, Mao was gravely ill. He suffered a series of heart attacks, and his condition rapidly worsened. Despite the efforts of his medical team, there was very little they could do, and on the 8th of September, he slipped into a coma. And in the early hours of September 9th, 1976, at 12:10 a.m., Mao Zedong died. The announcement of Mao's death was made later the same day. It was delivered in the most solemn and formal way through Chinese state radio. The broadcaster's voice cracked with emotion as the news was read. The great leader and teacher Chairman Mao has passed away. For many Chinese citizens, hearing these words was a shock. Mao had been the face of the nation for nearly 30 years. He had led the Communist Party to victory in 1949, founded the People's Republic of China, and dominated every part of life since then. His portrait hung in every school, office and village hall, and he was spoken of as the great helmsman, the man who guided the ship to state. To hear that he was gone was almost impossible to believe. The days after Mao's death saw extraordinary scenes of public grief. In Beijing, millions of people dressed in black armbands and bowed before Mao's portrait. Loudspeakers in villages and towns across the country played funeral music. Newspapers printed his image on the front of papers surrounded by black borders, and ordinary citizens wept in the streets. Many knelt in front of Mao's statue in Tiananmen Square, crying uncontrollably. Some fainted from emotion, and others wrote poems and letters to Mao, thanking him for what they believed he had given the nation. At the same time, the mourning was also carefully managed by the Communist Party. Mao was praised as a genius, a hero, and the saviour of China. The darker parts of his rule, the famines caused by the Great Leap Forwards or the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, were not mentioned. Mao's body was placed in state at the Great Hall of the People of Beijing. Thousands of high-ranking officials and foreign dignitaries came to pay their respects. His body was dressed in a simple grey suit, lying in a glass coffin surrounded by flowers. On September 18th, a massive memorial service was held. The ceremony began with 3 minutes of silence across the nation. Trains stopped, factories paused work, and even traffic was halted. Sirens and horns echoed across China in a final salute. Hao Gunfeng, Mao's chosen successor, delivered the main eulogy. He praised Mao as a great Marxist, a great proletarian revolutionary, strategist and theorist. The message was clear. The party would continue under Mao's guiding ideas, even if the man himself was gone. After the funeral, Mao's body was embalmed. Instead of being cremated, as he had once wished, his remains were placed into a specially built mausoleum on Tiananmen Square. The Chairman Mao Memorial Hall, completed in 1977, still houses his body today, where millions of people have lined up to see him. Now, as mentioned, still today, the body of Mao can be seen and visited, and he looks as if he is just asleep. Mao himself requested that his remains were to be cremated, but powerful officials in government, including his own widow, decided he should be embalmed and put on display in a similar way to other communist leaders, such as Vladimir Lenin. Before the natural process of decay had set in and took hold, Zai Liao, who was involved in overseeing experimental scientific techniques, was brought in to view the leader's body, and he was then tasked to try and cool the corpse. It had been placed inside of a wooden coffin behind a heavily constructed glass box, and the body was at room temperature beneath hot electric lights. The aim of the scientist was to get the temperature down to around 4 degrees Celsius, and the body could not be frozen. At the time, Chinese systems to do this were basic, and with hours nitrogen gas had been brought in to surround the corpse, and Mao's body temperature was brought to around 8 degrees. People worked around the clock to keep his body cool, and it took 8 days for the work to be done. The corpse was drained of fluid, was injected with formaldehyde to keep it pristine, and during the process things did go a little wrong, and it was said that the former ruler's head swelled up like a football. The vital organs should have been removed and the arteries and veins flushed out within 2 hours of death, but this was not done. Today, the visible parts of the body are surrounded by a dry atmosphere on view in the crystal case, but all other parts are covered by clothing, and these are suffused in a liquid, and the public cannot see this. At the end of the day, of each showing, the body is lowered into a special humid container and kept at low temperature, and once a year the hands and face are completely moisturised. The legacy of Mao's death is complex. For many Chinese people in 1976, it felt like losing a father figure. They remembered him as the man who had united the country, defended it from foreign powers, and had given it a sense of pride. But over time, historians and ordinary citizens alike have looked more critically at his rule. Mao's campaigns, the Great Leap Forwards in the 1950s and the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. These caused immense suffering, famine, violence and the deaths of millions of people. His leadership left deep scars that are still felt in China today. Even so, Mao's remain an iconic figure. His portrait still hangs over the entrance to the Forbidden City in Beijing. His face is printed on every banknote, and for the Chinese Communist Party he remains a symbol of revolution and national unity, even if his policies are no longer followed in practice. The death of Chairman Mao on September 9th, 1976 was one of the most significant moments in modern Chinese history. It brought to a close a period of radical revolution and opened the way for major changes. The days of mourning showed just how deep Mao was woven into the fabric of Chinese society. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.